When the words medium format toy camera are mentioned, there are probably a couple of names that come to mind, one of them being Diana. Over recent years, these cameras have generated cult status. However, it might not be for what you would usually associate a camera with: quality. Produced by the Great Wall Plastic Factory in Hong Kong in the 1960s, the camera was originally exported to the United States and the UK as cheap wholesale, with the majority being given away as novelty prizes or product promotions. The camera was so cheap that they only sold for about 50 cents each. The camera takes 120 film, however it was during a time when Kodak released the more higher quality Instamatics, and the decline in roll film meant that Diana cameras were being disregarded or thrown away. Over the course of its production, several other manufacturing companies copied the design and are generally referred to as Diana clones. Some of these clones may have even been made in the original factory. With its low manufacturing cost, it's clearly evident that quality control wasn't at the forefront when producing these cameras. With its cheaply made plastic body and single lens element, again also made of plastic, were also prone to light leaks and terrible flaring. The lens was so poorly made that imperfections and blurring were evidently visible in all images. However, the quality of these imperfections changed from one camera to the next. With all of these drawbacks, it's hard to imagine why anyone would want to use one, though I think it's because of these flaws that make them attractive: their uniqueness and less clinical approach to photography. It wasn't until 2007 that Lomography decided to recreate this classic camera from scratch by matching the design and original colours, calling it the Diana F+. Following the subsequent years after, they also produced their own Diana clones, releasing versions of different colours and patterns. Even though I grew up using film cameras, 120 film wasn't really targeted towards the average household family, so when I got back into film photography and discovered what 120 film was, I definitely knew I had to give it a go. Though I didn't want to spend too much money, as after some initial research, I found out that medium format cameras were not cheap, especially when results returned back names such as Rolleiflex, Hasselblad and Mamiya. With some more digging around though, that's when I came across the Diana. As you'd expect from the camera like this, the functions are pretty lacking. On top of the lens barrel is where you'll find the shutter selection lever, with only 2 speeds available, 1/60th and bulb. On the bottom are 4 aperture icons: cloudy, semi-cloudy, sunny and P. According to the Lomography website, these icons symbolise f22, f16 and f11 respectively, with the P representing pinhole, which is about f150. However, to use these, the front lens element has to be removed. Thankfully, this is pretty easy to do. There's only a simple viewfinder for composing. Because of this, focusing is done by rotating the lens element on the front, with 3 handy zones to help pick when choosing your subject distance. The lens rotates freely, so I suppose technically you could choose in between the distances. Initially for this review, I had set myself the task to try and create long exposures, as that's what I enjoyed most when doing black and white landscape photography. However, there seemed to be an issue when I developed my photos. After some troubleshooting, I did find out that the light was coming into the camera body via the shutter release. However, it was only when I was using the bulb function, so after some patching up, it was time to try again. So I've just arrived at a small little village by the coast, which I used to visit quite a lot when I did my landscape images. So after diagnosing the light leak on the Diana, I've patched up and kind of hope that that's enough to allow me to do the things I wanted to initially do. So we're going to head down to the seafront as it's high tide, and I've brought my filter set to kind of hold in the front of the lens to kind of reduce the amount of light to allow me to have longer shutter speeds. So hopefully my bodged kind of holding setup will be good enough to allow me to do the things I wanted to do initially. So let's kind of head on down to try and attempt to get those silky smooth water textures. So the setup I've currently got is these Lee filters, which I've had for ages, with a red and a 6-stop ND filter. So I'm kind of doing is kind of holding it in front with one hand and then my phone in the other with my timer. But then because there's no thread for a shutter cable, I'm kind of having to hold my finger to the shutter release as well. So it's a bit precarious. So there's only one way of really finding out is to actually develop the film. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers that what I'm doing is kind of adequate enough to capture the long exposures that I'm kind of going for. So yeah, all we can do is hope and wait and see. Ignoring the zone focusing, there are a few other niggles I have come across when using the camera, and they're both related to the inside and spool of the film. The first being that you really have to make sure that the film lead is wound properly onto the taking reel, otherwise the film won't wind tightly enough onto the new spool, and because of this can cause light leaks on exposed frames once removed from the camera. The second gripe I have is that the piece of plastic which holds the spool in place is pretty flimsy, and mine is actually broken, causing the spool not to be tightly aligned as much as I'd like. However, this hasn't caused any issues in terms of advancing the film, though it does require me to put a little bit more force when advancing the advance wheel. Who's this camera targeted towards? You'd think it would be for newcomers onto the hobby, but I would probably say these cameras are for people who already have some knowledge about film and how to work with it. Because when I first started out and picked up the camera, I got the negatives developed, the images were extremely underexposed. I think that was because I was just using the icons on the bottom of the lens to set the exposure, but not really knowing what the f value they were, and the camera doesn't really come with any instructions on how to expose an image, so you're just kind of relying on the information on the camera itself. Because of those early results, I was really afraid of using the camera, and I didn't want to just throw away film in hopes that the odd chance that an image would come out or not. So why even consider buying one of these cameras, considering the issues in quality? Hands down, these cameras aren't going to be creating high resolution images anytime soon. But I think what I enjoy about these cameras is that they encourage experimentation, thinking outside the box in terms of image making, and trying things that you might not necessarily do with a fully functioning camera. I think a lot of people probably see these cameras as something to try a few times and then put on the shelf and aren't really seen as a serious camera. However, what if I said that people like Mark Sink used the Diana to make photos of Andy Warhol and Grace Jones, or Michael Kenner, renowned landscape photographer, publishing a book just using a Holga? Then maybe that will push assumptions aside on a simple yet unique camera.